Hi everybody, welcome to the video. We're going to talk about how to save for retirement, how much you need to save every week, what interest rate you'll need, and a target for your retirement. For this example, let's say we're in our 40s and we want to retire in our 60s, so we're going to look at a 20-year horizon. You figured out with other information and maybe a couple of my future videos how much you'll need for a nest egg. For rough numbers now, we'll say 500,000. That should give you $20,000 a year, plus maybe your spouse and you will have another 45,000. So that would be $65,000 a year in retirement. So, okay, so let's go. And we know we need 500,000, but instead of 383 a week, let's say we can only save 188 per week. Now, we're going to increase the investment every year, year over year, with our job raise to account for cost of living. So when we have our investment retirement goal of 500,000, that will all be adjusted for inflation. So that should be easy. Every year you get your raise and you put the money right, you put the same percentage of your overall net salary into your savings, and hopefully your gross salary would go in with your 401k and you'd get more match, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, so the question is, I have 188 a week. My goal is 500,000. What return rate do I need? Right now, with randomly 3% that was already in the cell, I can get 245,000 after 20 years. So a cool way to do this in Excel is the what if function. So I say I want the 20-year future value to be equal to 500,000. And I want to change my interest rate, and I click OK, and it says I need a 10% interest rate. And you notice that the graph from the old 3%, which was pretty linear, whoops, technical difficulty there. The 3% was pretty linear, but the 10% starts to go up exponentially, and this is what you want. Higher interest is better because of compounded interest. That's the so-called beauty of compounded interest. So this would give us our 500,000. This would give us 4% of that would be 20,000 a year, plus you and your spouse's Social Security. That could be 65, 70,000 a year. And, you know, if you've done the other financial things, like paid for your house and stuff, I think we could make a budget in a future video to live on 65,000 a year. So, okay, so I need 10%. So what gives 10% interest? Gold is 4%. We talked about that in the first video. Bonds are 6%. Right now, CDs are maybe 2%. Let's say let's say 3%, but that'll only give you 245,000, which is less than half of what we did at 10%. So what gives us 10%? 100% stocks. So would it be true that if we invested 100% of our 188 a week in stocks, that we could have 500,000 in 20 years? Absolutely not. That's the main purpose of the video. It's not possible to have fixed interest and still save enough money for retirement. We have to look at history. So let's look at the next tab, and I'll put the link for this historical data in the description, and we're going to look at variable returns. So here's essentially the same table that we looked at a minute ago. I moved the $188 up here a little bit. Let's say we start with nothing. Of course, if we started with something, it would be better. We talked about that in the first video, and our goal is the same. So now we want to look at what does the historical data say for the last 90-something years. So going back prior to the Great Depression, going back through World War II, the baby boomer boom, the high inflation in the 70s, saving and loan crisis, 2008 debacle, all the way to last year, yes, it averaged 10%. So that's pretty good. But the standard deviation, which we'll get into higher level math later, is pretty high at 19%. The standard deviation of a CD is 0. It never changed. That's a fixed asset. But a standard deviation of 19% allows it to walk all over the place. So let me show you. So I've taken this data now here, fancy formula, uses the historical data to pick a random value for these 90-something years and put it in the compound interest formula. So going back to the previous tab, the compound interest formula is simply the value that I had before it, C5, 9776, and then 1 plus my interest rate, so in this case, 1.1. So we multiply 9776 by 1.1, and then we add whatever we had before. So it comes out to 20,530, and so forth. Same formula, just moves down a year. Same formula, uses the 32,359 above it, but the same interest rate. Now here's the kicker. We can't use a fixed interest rate of 10%. So what we're going to do, and use an Excel and not some fancy $2,000 Monte Carlo software, we're going to look at the historical data, which is all tabulated nicely by this professor. And I'll include the link in the description. So here's the array, and I've already done it, and I'll leave the file in the description, and watch what happens as it changes. So now my interest rate is changing, and look at my future value. I only wanted 500, but I'm all over the place, right? Sometimes I get less, way less than 500. Sometimes I get 1 million. Sometimes I get 295. It's a mess. So let's look at this with some more statistics and explain how we can think of this together. Okay, so what have we done here? So we've used this array of historical data, and we've created 11 scenarios. So if you had done this, and your son had done this, and then your grandson and his grandson, using this historical data set, randomly picking interest rates over time, and going through the scenario, this would be the annual return that you would get from using the random interest rates of history here. In this scenario, here's what you would get in this scenario, etc., etc., etc. Now, we said before that the average interest rate is 10 and the standard deviation is 19%. But if you go over 20 years, the standard deviation gets much smaller. I'll explain that in a minute. But watch the values before we get into more explanation. Watch them change. Watch how high and low they get. So see if you get something that you like in this column 32. Do you get 500 or do you get less than that? Sometimes you get a lot more, sometimes you get a lot less. This is pretty much the only thing that makes retirement planning tricky. And there's a way to fix it. Look, in this case, you lost $104,000. Oh my God. Okay, so let's look at some more stats here. Okay, so in this example, we've tried 11 different scenarios with random interest rates over 20 years. So this is randomized about 110 times. No, 20 times 11, 210 times. Then we average up all of the annual returns, and then we pick a min out of the group and a max out of the group for a future value. Okay, and then we can do the function F9 key, and we can keep trying things and see what it does. So looking at I only need 10, but I want it 10, right? This is what I can get over 20 years. 11, 9, 7, 10, 14, 11, 7, 5, 8, 13, 17, all over the place. Okay, so how can we look at this statistically? Again, our assumption let me pull this up a little bit. So we're going to increase the investment amount year over year with our job raise to account for cost of living. So we can talk all in today's dollars, not worry about that. The standard deviation, which we're going to talk about how that works, but we can talk about it at a high level right now. The beauty of the so-called central limit theorem is the year-over-year standard deviation of 19% that we looked at historically will go down by the square root of the number of years. So easy way to think of that, the square root of 4 is 2. So if my standard deviation is 19 and I hold the value for 4 years, I divide that by the square root of 4 and I cut it in half, right? So with 20 years, I cut 19% down to 4%. There's 19% divided by the square root of 20. Okay, so knowing that, I can use simple statistics to get my minimum and my maximum statistically. I can say, without the expensive software, 2 times the standard deviation of 4, 2, the number 2, from the average of 10 will give me the low value, 223. Okay, in this case of 11 scenarios, I got 314. If I did this 100,000 times, 95% of the time I'd get 223,000. My high return is very attractive. If I get lucky, I'm in the top 5%. It's the average plus 2 times 4, 18%, which would be $1.2 million. In this case, I got 910. But I can be a little lower than this. I can be a little higher than this. And this is too wide. So going back to our simple table, we figured out to get, with only $188 a week, a goal of 500,000, we need 10%. The only way to do that is with stocks. But historically, stocks will give us all over the map. Stocks will give us in 20 years from $250,000 to 1,200,000. That's too risky for people. People don't want to do that. So we're going to talk about diversification, how to drive the standard deviation lower by diversifying uncorrelated assets. We're going to do that in the future. If you like this video, please click the like sign and subscribe. And I look forward to being back and doing more videos on this shortly. Remember, next time, diversification. We're going to drive that standard deviation low. Thank you. Have a good one.